Good morning, guys. So today is the day when I start to build this second rudder. As you probably remember, we had one good rudder that I managed to repair and epoxy over the top. From that one I cast a mold. Let's have a little look.
If you remember back to the boatyard, when we dropped the rudders down, there was some serious black marking on one of the rudders. So after some investigation, it kind of proved that we needed to rebuild one of them.
Good question. Am I happy that I did this or am I not? Answer is yes. Not sure if you can see it, but it's full of water. So if I'd done the repair, the water would have been trapped inside. It wouldn't have had a chance to escape, and I reckon it would have got worse. So at the end of the day, I'm very happy that I have opened this up and that we're going to build a new one.
So using some polyester resin, Davy was able to create a mold from the one good rudder that we still had. This mold will be perfect to create a brand new rudder.
For making one rudder, this is going to be absolutely perfect. So here is the mold section, and if you notice this big board that I got here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a jig. So I'm going to cut this board down slightly, use this section here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to affix my mold, so that'll be fixed down and screwed down. Then the other rudder, the correct one that we made the mold from, will lay on this board here. And then from this board, then I can align everything up. Some small blocking for the stock, the mold itself. Then that can be removed, and afterwards when I put in the new stock, or it's actually going to be reused, then everything will be aligned, and then we can glass this up. So this is a solid rudder, so this is going to be built with polyester because it's a cheaper product. And then on the outside, when it comes out of the mold, then I will epoxy around the outside, epoxy barrier coat, and then anti-fouling. Okay, here, so we got the basics of the jig laid out here. So what we got, let's start down the bottom end here. So I've put the rudder post in, the first half of the mold is secure, got the straightening, and I've had to strengthen up this bit of plywood as well. So I need to do a bit more work on this jig just to strengthen it up, but I've got my measurements, I know where everything goes. This is the lid of the mold, goes on top. So they'll obviously be fixed together, and then I'll make a hole in this mold where I'll be pouring in the resin. But what we're going to do, we've got a bit of pitting here on the rudder stock itself. My buddy Craig over there, and you've probably seen him in the time lapse, is working on some wiring for this jig. No, it might be for the trailer anyway, for Tom's trailer. So he's got a welder here, so I'm going to clean this up, give it a bit of sand back, and he's going to try and fill in some of that pitting and stuff. There's a couple of little jobs I've got left to do. I need to drill a 3/8 bolt hole here, a 3/8 bolt hole here. So when I bolt through to these pieces and bolt through here, then the rudder stock is going to stay exactly in the right position for the mold itself. That means I can remove this piece of wood without the rudder stock falling down. Just leave that in there temporary for now. Next stage of this one here. So I'm not going to do the glassing today, I'm going to come back and do that one. But what we're going to do to actually be able to lay the glass in here, sorry, just move a couple. There goes the rudder stock. To be able to lay the glass in here, what I have previously done, let me just find the pieces. Previously inside this mold, made up a piece of fiberglass. Now this will be the thickened shell basically for the actual rudder itself. So the new resin I pour will be on the inside. So you see me trim off the edges so it fits in here. I do need to go around with a grinder so it sits flush with the mold. Also got to cut round in here with a sander just to get it flush with the stock. Then the next one, obviously for the top, that will go rudder stock inside. And now one more shell, and on top of that shell will go the other half. Then that'll all be bolted together. As you can see, it's not perfect at the moment because I do need to cut these edges back or grind them back. But I'm not going to start doing that today because I'm going to get covered in fiberglass dust, and that's just not necessary. Next time I come down here, I'm going to do a lot of glass work, so I'll do that little bit of sanding and the prep work, and then I'll be able to clamp all this together. And hey presto, we should have a rudder. Once it comes out the mold, I am actually going to skin it with epoxy one more time because there'll obviously be a join area. Other than that, we're looking pretty good to go. Okay, all parts are made, so what it's to do now, thoroughly clean everything with acetone. Then what I'm going to do after that, all of the areas, for example, the flange area, the outside of these two shells, which are now laying and cut and ground to the right shape. I'm going to make sure I wax everything up that doesn't need the resin to stick to it. Now the wax is on, everything's cleaned, everything's waxed that needs to be waxed. But what I want to do, so this is the inner shell part of the rudder. Now these guys marry up to each other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to epoxy the inside of this so it's a nice fresh layer that can go tacky. I'm also going to do the same here, and also around the edge I'm going to use a little thickened epoxy, so it's not an exact perfect match but not far off, so that then when I push this shell on together, that can cure and dry with the epoxy before we pour the resin into the middle cavity, if you will. I'm going to do that standing up. So first of all, let's mix up a bit of epoxy, wipe it out in the inside here with a paintbrush, and a bit of thickened around the edge, and we'll clamp the whole mold back in place and crack on from there. Alright guys, so pretty much ready to pour. I've got a small funnel here where the resin's going to go in. Also, I just did a little bit of a tester to find out if this resin is going to harden. It has done. It's very, very hot. So I'm going to cut down the amount of hardener I'm adding, just to try and keep the temperature low. I want it to harden without getting too hot. Looking good so far. Probably shouldn't speak too soon. Just trying to see if I've got any resin leaking out the bottom of the mold. So I'm 2 gallons short of resin, so I'm gonna hold it here. I'm gonna fly down to the store quickly, pick up 2 gallons. I've still got enough hardener. Just top this off, so bear with me. Okay, back from the store. I've got 2 more gallons of resin. I've just been checking here. It is hardening, which is really, really good to see. Still a chemical bond. It's still tacky. It's not been left that long, so I can continue to build up on that. I think the gallons got bigger this time, which I'm not complaining about. Alright, fantastic. That is done. The pour is done. I went a bit over the top. I only need 1 more gallon, not 2. But anyway, save that other one for another project. That is no problem. Doesn't seem to be any air bubbles escaping. Everything's full to the top. So we will let that cure overnight. And then I'll come back tomorrow and we'll crack this one out of the mold. Woohoo! That was easy. Comes. Our second rudder, guys. Check that out. Fantastic. Yep, it's just as heavy as the other one. So I've got both the rudders now set up on these seahorses. One's equaling the weight of the other, obviously, so that actually stands up. So this is the rudder that we just made, pulled out of the mold this morning. I've just given this a real quick coat of epoxy. I'm going to let that go tacky, very slightly tacky. It's getting there now. I'm going to fill in, there's a few little bits and pieces that weren't perfect, so I'm going to go across those with some thickened epoxy. And then what I'm going to use, I'm going to use some matting. It's a lightweight fiberglass cloth. Just to go around all of the edges, so it goes over the join of the 2 inner shells that were stuck together with the thickened epoxy. So that's today's mission. Let's crack on. Okay, so this morning, well, I say morning, it's afternoon now. Unfortunately, it's been raining all morning. I did want to get started earlier, but anyway, back to these 2 rudders. So I've used a primer, which is an epoxy barrier coat. This morning I have sanded them back, and I want to put a little bit more fairing on there. There's a couple little nicks and chunks that I want to fix. Nothing too major, and the same on this one here. It's fared back quite nicely, to be honest. Okay, so that's the rudders all done with epoxy barrier coat. The fairing is done. So tomorrow, a slight sanding, just very lightly, clean with acetone, anti-foul. Pretty much job done. Okay, so the last and final morning, I've got down here, checked, everything's cured nicely. I've given them, both of them, a very light sand over a bit of 180 sandpaper, just as a keyway ready for the anti-foul paint. They're both looking fantastic, so going to give them a wipe over with acetone and then start put on as many coats of anti-foul as I can. I've got about half a tin, so probably get about 4 or 5 coats on. All right, let's crack on. Well, that's it, guys. There's 2 rudders ready for installation, hopefully tomorrow afternoon. So, happy days.
Stay tuned for next week to see how we install these rudders while the boat is still in the water.